Some stories don't begin with thunder or fireworks. They begin with the tiniest voice in the room, saying something that no one expected to hear. If stories like this move you, if they make you believe in second chances, consider subscribing. Every new subscriber is a quiet promise that we'll keep telling what the world needs to remember: kindness, truth, and the love we almost lost. The Asheville Police Department sat quietly under the golden haze of a late spring afternoon. The American flag out front rustled gently, half-heartedly, like it too was tired of the weight of things unspoken. Inside, Detective Chris Monroe leaned back in his chair, spinning a pen between his fingers while reviewing incident reports. It was a slow Monday. No arrests, no outbursts, just the hum of old computers and the occasional crackle of the dispatch radio. Then the front doors creaked open. At first, no one noticed. Children didn't often wander into police stations alone. But the tiny girl who stepped in didn't hesitate. Her shoes squeaked softly on the linoleum floor, and she clutched a pink stuffed rabbit with ears far too worn. She walked straight to the front desk, where Officer Dana Cruz was sipping lukewarm coffee and scrolling through her phone. The little girl tugged at her sleeve. "Excuse me?" Dana looked down, startled. "Oh, hi there, sweetie. Are you okay?" The girl pointed to the far wall behind Dana, where the department's leadership photos were proudly displayed. "That's my daddy's name," she said, her voice clear and certain. "My daddy's name is on the building." Dana froze, coffee halfway to her mouth. "What did you say?" The girl pointed again, tiny fingers smudging the glass case that framed a brass plaque. "Chief Daniel Carter, Asheville Police Department." Dana stood up slowly. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The girl grinned. Emma Grace Mitchell." The name struck like a drumbeat in Dana's chest. Carter's middle name was Grace. No one talked about it. It was his mother's name, one he carried, but never mentioned. "Where's your mom, Emma?" Emma glanced toward the door, now closing behind her as if ushering out the last rays of a calm afternoon. "She was on the phone outside, but then she told me to wait here if I got lost." Dana's instincts kicked in. She pressed the intercom. "Dispatch, we've got a little one here. Lost child. Says her name is Emma Mitchell Monroe," looked up from his desk. "Mitchell." Before Dana could answer, the door at the end of the hall opened and Chief Daniel Carter himself stepped out, coffee in one hand, paperwork in the other. "What's going on?" he asked casually. Then he saw her, and he dropped everything. The cup shattered on the floor, but no one moved to clean it. Daniel stood frozen, staring at the little girl who looked too familiar. The same stubborn chin, the same eyes, hazel green, wide and watchful. Emma tilted her head at him, studying his uniform. Then she smiled. "You're the man on the wall." Daniel took a breath, and it felt like it tore something inside him. "What did you say?" Emma turned to the plaque and pointed again. "That's your name, right? My mommy said my daddy's name is Daniel Carter." Silence. Long, echoing silence. Dana stepped in gently. "Chief, maybe we should get her somewhere quieter?" He nodded slowly, mechanically. "Yeah, the break room." They sat Emma at the round table next to the vending machines. Dana poured her apple juice from the fridge and offered crackers. Emma, completely unbothered by the attention, told them she liked bunny-shaped snacks and that her mommy worked in a place with coffee and flowers. Daniel couldn't take his eyes off her. He was sweating and freezing all at once. He looked at Dana. "Mitchell. She said Mitchell?" "Yeah," Dana whispered. Daniel's throat went dry. "Sarah Mitchell?" Dana nodded. Daniel stood so fast his chair screeched. He turned away, pacing the far wall like a man suddenly remembering how to breathe. He hadn't heard that name in 4 years. Sarah Mitchell had been the storm he never saw coming. They'd met during a charity event for youth outreach. She was warm, stubborn, sharp as a blade, and had a laugh that made Daniel feel like his chest wasn't made of bricks. For a year, she was his world. Then, one morning, she was gone. No note, no fight, just silence. And now, a 3-year-old with Sarah's smile and his eyes was sitting in his precinct. "Chief?" Daniel turned. Chris Monroe had entered with a printout. "We found the mother, Sarah Bennett Mitchell. Listed address in West Asheville. Lives above a florist." Daniel's breath hitched. "Sarah owns a florist?" "No," Monroe replied. "She's a barista at the cafe next door. High Five Coffee." Daniel remembered the place, and now the pieces were falling together faster than he could hold them. He knelt beside Emma. "Sweetheart, do you know your mommy's phone number?" Emma looked unsure. "It's in my backpack, but it's in Mommy's car." Daniel stood and nodded to Monroe. "Get someone out there. I'm going myself." But he didn't make it to the door, because just then it opened, and there she was, Sarah Mitchell, wind-tousled hair, panic in her eyes, breathless, wild, like a mother who had just realized her world might be slipping through her fingers. She froze when she saw Daniel. He stared back at her. For a moment, the room didn't exist, only the weight of what wasn't said. Emma squealed. "Mommy! Look, he's the man from the picture frame!" Daniel took one step forward. "Sarah!" Sarah's mouth opened, but no sound came. Then Emma ran to her and hugged her knees. "See? I found my daddy!" And Daniel Carter, chief of police, war veteran, son of a cold dynasty and a man who thought he'd buried his past, felt his heart break in half. Because the little girl was right. He didn't just see his name on the wall that day. He saw the life he never knew he had. The silence in the room wasn't heavy, it was surgical. The kind that cuts into the soul, clean and deep. Sarah didn't say a word. Not to Daniel, not to the officers around them. She just knelt beside Emma, pulled her close, and held her like she might disappear if she blinked. Emma looked up, confused by the tension. She reached out and touched Sarah's cheek. "Why are you crying, Mommy?" Daniel took one step forward, but Sarah didn't look at him. She didn't even flinch. That somehow hurt the most. Dana cleared her throat gently. "Ma'am, you're welcome to stay here and talk somewhere private. No pressure, but—" Sarah stood, finally meeting Daniel's eyes. Her voice was even. "I'd prefer to leave." Daniel felt that like a slap. "Sarah, wait." But she was already moving toward the exit, Emma's hand tucked tightly in hers. He called after her. "At least let me walk you to your car." She stopped in the doorway. Her shoulders tightened, then slowly relaxed. 10 minutes, she said without turning around. Not one more. They stood beside her dented red Honda parked just off Court Plaza. The sun was dipping behind the downtown buildings, casting long shadows across the hood. Daniel shoved his hands in his coat pockets. "You just disappeared." Sarah glanced down. "I had to. That's not an answer." "No," she agreed, "but it's the truth." He studied her. "Is she mine?" Sarah didn't look away. "Yes." Daniel's knees nearly buckled. He had to lean back against the brick wall behind him to keep standing. "I didn't know," he whispered. "You never told me." "I tried." "What?" "I wrote you letters, Daniel. After I found out. Dozens of them. Every week for 3 months. Her eyes darkened. "Your mother responded." Daniel blinked. "What?" "She said if I didn't leave, she'd make sure you never saw me again, that she had power, money, influence, and that if I truly loved you, I'd protect you from the scandal, from me. Daniel swallowed hard. The cold wind scraped at the back of his neck. She told me you left because you couldn't handle the pressure, that you used me, that you lied. Sarah laughed, but it was empty. Of course she did. Daniel stepped closer. Why didn't you fight back? She looked at Emma, now climbing into the back seat with her stuffed rabbit. Because I was 28, pregnant and alone, and because I believed her, that if I stayed, things would only get worse for you. And for her? Daniel clenched his jaw. So you disappeared. I rebuilt, she corrected. I worked 2 jobs, I lived in a 1-bedroom above a flower shop, and I raised a child who deserved the truth. Not secrets, not bitterness, just love. He looked down. His voice was raw. She's incredible. Sarah's tone softened, almost imperceptibly. She is. They stood there for a moment, the wind wrapping around them like memory. Then Daniel asked the question that had been burning since Emma said his name. Why now? Sarah hesitated. Emma was asking more questions, she admitted. About her dad. I didn't want to lie anymore, so I showed her a photo, a news clipping. She recognized your name when we walked past the department. And before I could stop her, she walked in, Daniel finished. Sarah nodded. She's never met her grandfather either. That landed like lead. Daniel stared off at the fading horizon, then back at Sarah. Do you want me out of her life? I want you to be honest, she said gently. With her. With yourself. Don't come in if you're going to leave again. Don't say you want this if you're not ready. He nodded slowly. I'm ready. She studied him. It's not just playdates and birthday parties. She has nightmares. She has questions. And if you're in, you need to be in. Because this time, she'll remember. Daniel's throat tightened. I'm in. Sarah didn't smile, but she didn't walk away either. I have to get her home, she said. He nodded. Can I see you again? Tomorrow? Come by High Five. I work the morning shift. 7 to noon. I will. She opened the car door. Emma looked up at Daniel and waved. Bye, police daddy. Daniel's heart split wide open. Sarah slid into the driver's seat, turned the key, and drove off, tail lights fading into the orange dusk. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. Not for lack of exhaustion, but because the memories came back in waves. The first time he saw Sarah at the fundraising gala, their Sunday mornings reading the paper together, the smell of her hair after rain, and the last thing she said before she left. I'm sorry. He never believed it. Not truly. He'd buried his pain under work, under duty, under the weight of being Carter's only son. But now, in the quiet of his apartment, with a forgotten dinner cold on the stove, he sat holding a crumpled news clipping from 3 years ago. Local cafe owner launches flower-sharing campaign for Children's Hospital. In the photo, Sarah Mitchell, holding a bouquet of hand-tied daisies, her eyes alight with purpose. His daughter had been there, somewhere behind that story, and he had missed it. The next morning, he walked into High Five Coffee just past 7:10 a.m. The cafe buzzed with the aroma of espresso and fresh muffins. A young barista greeted him. Morning. What can I get you? I'm here for Sarah, he said. The barista raised an eyebrow, then pointed toward the back counter. That's her, with the messy braid. Sarah turned before he could speak. You're early. I'm serious, he said. She nodded. Then grab an apron. We're short-staffed. He blinked. Wait, you want me to work? If you want to be in Emma's life, Sarah said with a sly smile, you better know how to make a cappuccino. Daniel grinned. You're still impossible. Still worth it? She asked. He looked at her. Really looked. Yes, he said. The coffee grinder screamed like a warning as Daniel fumbled with the milk steamer, hands clumsy, apron already stained. It was only 9:12 a.m., but he felt like he'd run a marathon. Don't tilt the pitcher like that, Sarah said, passing by with a tray of croissants. You'll scorch the milk. Daniel sighed. I was better at clearing crime scenes. Then go clear table 5, she teased without looking back. Behind the counter, the cafe buzzed with quiet energy. Students hunched over laptops, couples trading soft laughter, and sunlight spilling across the hardwood floor like something sacred. In the middle of it all, Daniel Carter, the chief of police, was frothing almond milk with a concentration usually reserved for bomb threats. But underneath it all, something itched at the edges of his mind. The letters. He couldn't shake them. That night, after Emma had gone to bed and Sarah curled up on the sofa with her laptop, Daniel sat in his apartment, silent, still. He opened the old cedar box at the bottom of his closet, where he kept things he didn't want the world to see. Medals, faded photos, regrets pressed into paper. Inside, a letter caught his eye. Unopened. Addressed in loopy feminine script. To Daniel Carter, 115 Willow Creek Lane, Asheville, North Carolina. No return address, just a small pressed flower taped to the corner. He stared at it, then at the second one, then a third. His chest tightened. He opened them, one by one. Each was from Sarah, dated weeks after she left. Words poured out, confused, heartbroken, but full of hope. Apologies. Explanations. I didn't want to go, but I was told I had no choice. I'm carrying your child, Daniel. I don't know what to do. Daniel covered his face with both hands. Oh my God. The letters had been delivered, but someone had hidden them in this box. Someone who had a key. His mother. Margaret Carter had been meticulous in everything, from the placement of her sterling cutlery to the grooming of her only child's future. She believed in image, legacy, lineage, and control. He remembered coming home from work one day and finding her tidying up his office. The cedar box had been left open. He hadn't thought much of it then. Now he knew better. The next morning, he stood in the foyer of Carter Estate, a house too big for warmth, with ceilings that echoed even whispers of truth. Margaret appeared at the top of the stairs, wrapped in a silk robe the color of bone. Daniel, she greeted, descending like royalty. You haven't called. He held up the letters. Her face didn't flinch. I found them. She said nothing. You lied to me, he said. You intercepted them. You hid them. Margaret exhaled through her nose. You were on the verge of throwing everything away for a girl with no money, no family, and no future. She was my future, Daniel shot back. And you took her from me. Margaret's tone sharpened. I saved you. Do you think I enjoyed threatening that girl? I did what had to be done. She was pregnant. I didn't believe her, Margaret replied coldly. Neither did you, if we're honest. Daniel took a step closer. She told me she sent letters. You told me she disappeared. You said she admitted to using me. She would have ruined you. She gave birth to your granddaughter, he said. To 4 letters you shoved into a box like they meant nothing. Margaret finally looked rattled. I was trying to protect our name. Well, Daniel said, voice trembling, now that name is written in crayon in a little girl's coloring book. right next to a rabbit sticker. And you'll never meet her if you don't make this right. Her lips thinned. Are you threatening me? No, he said, his voice like stone. I'm telling you, you've already lost. He left the mansion in silence, the front door slamming like a final gavel. In the car, he sat for a long time, hands on the wheel, chest tight. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He drove to the overlook at Blue Ridge Parkway, where he and Sarah used to park with coffee and music and dreams they couldn't yet afford. The view hadn't changed, but Daniel had. Back at Sarah's apartment, she opened the door, surprised. I thought you had a meeting. I did, he said, holding up the stack of letters. Her eyes widened. You found them? He nodded. In the box. She hid them, all of them. Sarah looked down. Daniel stepped closer. I'm sorry, for not fighting harder, for believing her, for letting you go. Sarah swallowed hard. You didn't know. But I should have, he said. I should have known you better than that. I should have trusted my heart, not her voice. Emma padded into the room, holding her stuffed rabbit by one ear. Why are you both sad again? Daniel crouched. We're not, honey. We're just fixing something old, like when your bunny lost an ear and Mommy sewed it back. Emma thought for a second, then nodded. Okay. And just like that, she skipped into the kitchen. Sarah watched her, then looked back at Daniel. Do you still want to be part of her life? He didn't hesitate. Every part. Sarah nodded once. Then let's start now. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the mountains, Daniel sat at the table beside Emma, helping her glue macaroni to paper for a school project about family trees. What's this? He asked. It's our family, she said. Me, Mommy, and now you. Daniel smiled, blinking away the heat behind his eyes. Where should I put your name? She asked. He pointed to the top branch. Right here. Emma grinned and wrote in careful letters. D.A.D. The house smelled like cinnamon and lemon oil. Sarah had insisted on deep cleaning the apartment that morning, saying something about starting fresh now that the truth was out. Daniel didn't argue. He wiped windows, vacuumed under furniture, and helped Emma organize her picture books by color, blue first, then red, then yellow, because sunshine should always come last. For the first time in years, it felt like something normal. At noon, Sarah stepped out to pick up pastries from a local bakery. Emma stayed behind with Daniel, building a small city out of cereal boxes and toilet paper rolls in the living room. Is this a castle or a space station? Daniel asked, carefully placing a plastic spoon as a flagpole. Emma tilted her head. It's both. Princess astronauts live there. Daniel laughed. Naturally. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He frowned but ignored it. Emma reached for another roll but paused when she heard something. A faint voice from the bedroom. Do you hear that? She whispered. Daniel turned toward the hallway. The phone in the bedroom was off the hook. He stood up slowly, brows furrowed. Emma followed behind, tiptoeing. They reached the door. The voice was faint but clear, crisp, composed, and far too familiar. Margaret Carter. You had no right to confront me, Daniel. I did what I had to. And if you think I'll let some barista derail this family's legacy, you are gravely mistaken. Daniel froze. Emma's eyes widened. Another voice answered. Sharper, colder, a man's voice. If you push this further, Mrs. Carter, I'll release everything. The forged medical reports, the judge's correspondence, the hush money. You're not untouchable anymore. Daniel's mouth went dry. The call wasn't to him. It was to someone else. Another accomplice. Emma tugged his sleeve. "Why is Grandma mad?" His chest tightened. He crouched beside her. "Emma, how long have you been listening to this?" She shrugged. "I was trying to call Mommy's phone to ask for apple juice, but it was already talking." Daniel gently picked up the receiver and hung it up. The silence that followed felt thick. Emma looked confused. "Did I do something wrong?" He shook his head. "No, sweetheart. You did just fine." But inside, Daniel was boiling. That night, after Emma fell asleep curled beside her stuffed rabbit, Daniel and Sarah sat at the kitchen table, a pot of chamomile tea between them. He told her everything. The call, the voice, the threats. Sarah didn't say a word for a full minute. Then softly, "She's still trying to erase me." "No," Daniel said. "She's trying to erase us." Sarah's fingers clenched around her mug. "She won't stop, Daniel. Not unless you make her." He looked down at the steam rising between them. "I intend to." The next morning, Daniel arrived at the Asheville County Records Office with a legal request in hand. His name still carried weight, but this time he didn't want privilege. He wanted proof. He requested every document connected to Margaret Carter: health declarations, property transfers, judicial correspondences. And there, hidden among innocuous tax filings, was a letterhead he recognized: Asheville Family Court, a scanned memo from 12 years ago. It was addressed to Judge Linda Pierce, a retired family court official. The signature at the bottom wasn't hers. It was Margaret's, forged. Daniel stared at the copy, heart pounding. She had faked a court order claiming Sarah had a restraining order filed against her for mental instability. It had never been submitted, just printed, just shown. And it had been enough to convince Sarah that Daniel himself had betrayed her. He ran his hands through his hair, heart beating like war drums. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was criminal. Back at the station, Daniel called in a favor. Detective Aaron Blake, an old friend and one of the few people Daniel trusted completely, stepped into his office. "You're shaking," Aaron said. "What happened?" Daniel handed him the documents. Aaron read, then swore under his breath. "You want this investigated?" Daniel nodded. But quietly, Aaron raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "She's still my mother," Daniel said. "But she doesn't get to win by breaking people." Aaron folded the documents. "Give me 3 days." That evening, Emma sat with Daniel on the porch, wrapped in a blanket as stars began to prick the night sky. "Daddy," he blinked. He never got used to that word. "Yes, sweetheart?" "Why doesn't Grandma like Mommy?" He exhaled slowly. "She doesn't know Mommy the way we do." Emma frowned. "Mommy's nice. She makes cinnamon rolls and doesn't yell at bugs." Daniel smiled. "That's true." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. "You don't have to like everyone, but you shouldn't be mean." He looked up at the stars. Sometimes wisdom didn't come from books or courtrooms. Sometimes it came from a 5-year-old with a blanket and a bunny. That night, Sarah found a note tucked into her jewelry drawer. It was in Daniel's handwriting. "She tried to erase our story, but I'm writing it back. For you. For Emma. For us." The frost came early that morning. Daniel woke to find the windows of Sarah's Honda glazed over with a delicate film of ice. The sun had barely begun its slow crawl over the mountains, and everything felt quiet, too quiet, like the air was holding its breath. Emma was still asleep, curled up with her stuffed rabbit. Sarah had just stepped out to grab muffins and hot cocoa for their Saturday fort party, a new tradition Emma insisted they honor every weekend. Daniel stepped onto the front porch to warm up the car for her return. That's when he saw it. A pale yellow envelope resting beneath the windshield wiper. Not taped, not stuck, just placed, deliberate. His stomach dropped. The handwriting on the front was too neat. Formal, familiar. Chief Daniel Carter. No return address. He plucked it carefully from the glass, eyes scanning the quiet street. A jogger passed by. A neighbor watered potted mums on her balcony. No one suspicious, no one out of place, but Daniel knew better. Back inside, he waited until Emma woke up and Sarah returned. Cheeks pink from the cold, arms full of paper bags and warm foam cups. "I got the cinnamon twist ones," she began, but stopped when she saw his face. "What happened?" He held out the envelope. Sarah's eyes darkened. "From her?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Daniel opened the flap slowly. Inside was a single sheet of thick, cream-colored stationery, typed cold. "Daniel, you've made your choice. You've aligned yourself with someone beneath your name, your family, and your legacy. That is your right, misguided as it may be. But if you continue to pursue legal action, you will force me to act in kind. I have friends. So do you. But mine have longer memories. Choose discretion over destruction." MC Sarah read it twice. Her hand trembled. "She's threatening you," she whispered. "No. She's threatening all of us." Daniel folded the paper slowly. "She's scared. That's what this is." Sarah looked at him, voice low. "But if she's scared, what does she do next?" The answer came that afternoon. Emma had been playing on the front steps, drawing sidewalk chalk daisies, while Daniel and Sarah cleaned the kitchen. The door was open, the wind crisp but gentle. Emma hummed to herself, completely absorbed in her colorful garden. Then she called out, "Mommy! Daddy! There's a man outside!" Daniel's head snapped up. He bolted toward the porch, heart pounding. A tall man in a charcoal coat had just rounded the corner of the street, briskly walking away. Emma stood by the bottom of the stairs, pointing after him. "He looked at me weird," she said. Daniel scooped her up and glanced around. No car, no badge, no reason. Just enough to rattle the bones. That evening, Daniel reviewed the security footage from a neighbor's doorbell cam. He froze the frame. There, the same man, unmarked jacket, face partially turned away, a scar on his jaw. Daniel knew that face. His name was Glenn Rosner, a retired PI, used to do cleanup for the rich and powerful. Margaret had used him once long ago to trace a business partner's mistress. Now, apparently, he was being used to watch a toddler. Daniel felt something ancient and dangerous rise in him. He didn't go to the precinct. He went to Margaret's townhouse, unannounced. She answered in pearls and linen, as if prepared for company. "Daniel," she said with a mild smile, "would you like tea?" "No." She stepped aside. He didn't. "You had Rosner watching my daughter." She tilted her head as if amused. "That's quite an accusation. I have footage." Her smile faded just slightly. "I wanted to be sure she was safe." "You wanted leverage," Daniel snapped. "You wanted to scare her, scare us." Margaret crossed her arms. "You've always been impulsive, but this? Throwing away your career, your name, over a girl who sells coffee and crayons?" "She's more than that," Daniel said. "And so is Emma." His voice broke. "She's mine, Mom, and you tried to erase her." For the first time, Margaret didn't speak. Daniel stepped back. "This is your last warning. Stay away, or the next letter will come from my attorney." He turned and left without waiting for an answer. Behind him, Margaret Carter stood alone in the foyer of her perfectly manicured townhouse, watching the door close like it was the end of an era. Because it was. That night, the wind howled across Asheville. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, writing something in a small leather-bound journal. When Sarah approached, he looked up. "It's for Emma," he said, "in case I ever can't explain things. So she'll know. We never stopped fighting for her." Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. "She'll know." Later, as the moon rose high and the neighborhood fell silent, Emma whispered sleepily from her bed, "Daddy?" Daniel looked down. "Yes, sweetheart? If the bad people come back, will you be there?" He didn't hesitate. "Every time," he said softly. "Every single time." Emma smiled and closed her eyes, her tiny fingers wrapped around his. And somewhere in the shadows outside, Glenn Rosner sat in a black car, camera in hand, waiting for the next instruction. He never got it. Because the next morning, Margaret Carter's name appeared in a sealed judicial report for obstruction and intimidation. An investigation Daniel never wanted to open, but now had no choice but to finish. It was one of those quiet afternoons where time seemed to stretch itself thin, like warm honey over toast. The sun poured through the front windows of Sarah's apartment, casting golden streaks across the hardwood floor. Emma was napping, a soft snore rising from beneath her quilt of animals and stars. Daniel sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped in thought. That morning, he'd filed a formal complaint with Internal Affairs regarding his mother's actions. It was the right thing to do, but it didn't feel like winning. It felt like grieving a version of his life that would never exist again. He hadn't spoken to Margaret since the confrontation. The silence between them now felt like a closed door, solid, final, and cold. Across the room, Sarah was folding laundry, quiet, focused. Then the door opened. Not loud, not dramatic, just a small creak followed by the sound of hesitant footsteps. It wasn't Emma, it was Laya, Sarah's niece, Emma's cousin. 9 years old, quiet, whip-smart, and fiercely protective of her younger cousin. She'd been visiting often since the holidays, especially on weekends. Daniel and Sarah had started to joke that she was the assistant big sister. Laya didn't say anything at first. She just walked into the living room, clutching a sketchbook so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. "Hi, sweetheart," Sarah said gently. "Is everything okay?" Laya nodded, then looked at Daniel. "I have something to show you," she said quietly. "But only you." Daniel blinked. "Me?" She nodded again, then walked past the coffee table, sat cross-legged on the floor, and opened her sketchbook. He lowered himself onto the rug beside her, cautious, respectful, as if she were holding something sacred. The pages were full of drawings, some in crayon, some in pencil. Most were of flowers, animals, things children often draw. But then he saw it, a drawing of him, seated at the kitchen table, Emma on his lap, laughing. He remembered that day. She'd told him a knock-knock joke so bad, he'd nearly choked on his tea from laughing. The sketch wasn't perfect, but it was true. He turned the page. Another one. Him and Sarah cooking dinner, Emma dancing on the chair behind them, and another. Him kneeling at the foot of Emma's bed, tucking her in. Laya watched his face the whole time, silent, measuring. Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat. "These are beautiful," he said. She shrugged. "I draw what I see." He turned one more page and froze. This one was different. It showed a house, a real one, brick, with a small front porch. Laya, Emma, and Sarah stood outside it, and on the porch stood him. But this time there was something written at the top in Laya's handwriting. "If he stays." Daniel couldn't speak. Laya looked up. Emma trusts people fast, I don't. He nodded. That's fair. I watched you. How you tuck her in. How you hold the mug with both hands like Mommy used to say you did. You look scared sometimes, but not of her. He met her eyes. Number never of her. You're scared of messing up? He smiled. That obvious, huh? She nodded. Everyone always leaves, she said, so soft it nearly got lost in the room's quiet. But you keep coming back. Daniel reached forward and gently closed the sketchbook. I'm staying, Laya, he said. Not just for Emma, for all of you, if you'll let me. She didn't smile, but she leaned slightly into his side. That was more than enough. Later that evening, Daniel sat on the front steps, watching the stars blink awake. Sarah stepped out beside him, a mug of tea in hand. She showed you the sketchbook? She asked. He nodded. That's a big deal, she said. She doesn't even show it to her teachers. She's brave, Daniel murmured, and more forgiving than most adults I know. Sarah sat beside him. She gets that from her mom, he smiled. Must run in the family. They sat in silence for a while, the good kind, companionable and calm. Then Sarah turned. She used to say if she had a dad, she'd draw him first. Daniel looked at the window where the lights from the girls' room glowed warm behind the curtain. I hope one day, he said, she draws me because she wants to, not because she's still deciding. Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder. She already is. Inside, Laya opened her sketchbook again. She flipped to the drawing with the porch, the one that said, If he stays. And next to it, with a fresh purple crayon, she carefully wrote 3 more words beneath the title. He really did. It happened just after 2 a.m. Daniel had fallen asleep in the armchair beside Emma's bed, a chapter book half open on his chest, and the soft glow of her nightlight casting pale blue stars across the ceiling. He had promised her they'd read just one more story. And, like most nights lately, he couldn't bring himself to leave once she drifted off. He stirred first to a sound that wasn't quite a cough, but not quite silence either. A soft, strained wheeze. His eyes snapped open. Emma was curled into a tight ball, her tiny frame trembling. Her breaths were short, shallow, raspy. Daniel leapt up, kneeling beside her. Emma, he whispered. No answer. He shook her gently. Her eyes fluttered open, wide with panic, lips pale. She tried to speak. No sound came. His heart dropped. Emma, stay with me. You're okay. You're okay, he said, even though he didn't believe it. Sarah burst in seconds later, hair messy, feet bare, eyes wild. What? She's not breathing right, Daniel choked out. We need help, now! Sarah didn't waste a second. She ran for her phone. Daniel lifted Emma into his arms, cradling her against his chest. Her breath was like broken glass. The ambulance came in 6 minutes. It felt like 60. Emma's body was limp but twitching. Her rabbit fell from her grasp somewhere between the hallway and the gurney. Daniel held her hand all the way to Mission Children's Hospital, his police badge flashing through paperwork and policy like a keycard to survival. Inside, they took her fast. Oxygen, 4th monitors, machines. He stood frozen in the hallway outside the trauma room, fists clenched, a hollow roar echoing in his chest. Sarah paced. She's had attacks before, she whispered, but never like this. Daniel turned to her. You've been doing this alone. She nodded. Since she was 1, ER twice, inhalers, steroids, Medicaid only goes so far. Daniel sat down hard in a plastic chair, burying his face in his hands. I should have been here. You couldn't have known. But I do now. He stood. I'm never letting this happen again. 3 hours passed. Finally, a pediatric pulmonologist, Dr. Leah Mendez, stepped into the hallway, her scrubs wrinkled, her face calm. "She's stable," she said. Daniel nearly collapsed. "She's still struggling, but the oxygen is helping. We'll keep her overnight. You can see her, but keep it calm. She's exhausted." He and Sarah nodded. Inside, Emma looked smaller than he'd ever seen her. Tiny. Fragile. Her eyes were closed, cheeks flushed, a plastic mask over her mouth, soft beeps surrounding her like lullabies. Daniel sat beside her and gently took her hand. "Hey, baby," he whispered. "You scared Daddy." A flutter of movement, her fingers around his. "I'm here," he said, "and I'm not going anywhere." Sarah stood in the doorway, one hand to her mouth. "You should lie down," she said. "I'm okay." "You're not." He looked up. "Neither are you." She walked in, pulled up a chair on the other side of the bed, and laid her head down beside Emma's hand. Together they stayed like that, silent, hearts shattered, love pouring out of the pieces. Later that morning, Dr. Mendez returned with a clipboard and a furrowed brow. "I need to be honest," she said. "Emma's condition is manageable, but it won't stay that way without long-term care. Steroids, inhalers, environmental controls, and a pediatric cardiopulmonary follow-up. And insurance." Daniel stood. "What do we do?" The doctor hesitated. "I've worked with families who've tried to patch this with temporary fixes. It doesn't work. Emma needs a treatment plan, permanently." Sarah folded her arms. "We don't qualify for most programs." Daniel looked between them. "What if I do?" Sarah turned sharply. "Daniel." "She's my daughter," he said. "I'll put her on my plan. I'll petition for joint custody, legal guardianship, whatever it takes." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "I already missed 3 years. I'm not missing another second." That afternoon, Daniel met with his attorney, Alexandra Hemsworth, in a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria. "She needs coverage immediately," he said. "And if I told you the fastest way to do that is to file for full parental rights?" she asked. "I'd sign the papers tonight?" Alexandra nodded. "Then we'll start with an emergency petition. Do you have DNA proof?" Daniel opened his wallet. Inside was a folded copy of the paternity report from 2 weeks prior, 99.9999% match. He slid it across the table. "Let's get this done." Back in Emma's hospital room, a soft knock broke the silence. It was Leah. She stood in the doorway with her backpack, looking unsure. Daniel smiled gently. "Hey, sweetheart." Leah stepped forward. Can I sit with her?" "Of course." She walked over, climbed into the chair beside Emma, and pulled something from her bag. Her sketchbook. She opened to a new page. This time she didn't show anyone, but Daniel saw it from where he sat. Just a glimpse. 4 figures in a hospital room. A little girl in bed. 2 adults beside her. 1 older girl holding her hand. And beneath it, in bold pencil strokes, "This is what staying looks like." That night, as the moon glowed through the hospital blinds, Daniel sat beside Emma once more. Her breathing was stronger now, deeper, calmer. She stirred. "Daddy?" He leaned closer. "I'm here." She opened her eyes. "Are we still in space?" He blinked, confused. "Space?" She smiled weakly. "The beeps sound like stars." Daniel laughed quietly. "Then yes, and you're the brightest one." She reached up and touched his face. "You didn't let go." He shook his head. "Never." The courtroom smelled faintly of wood polish and dust. It wasn't the kind of room you'd expect for a life-changing moment. No grandeur, no dramatic lighting. Just rows of benches, beige walls, and a judge's bench that looked older than everyone in it. But for Daniel, Sarah, and Emma, it might as well have been a cathedral. Emma sat between them, dressed in her favorite yellow dress with tiny daisies stitched into the hem. She clutched her rabbit tightly to her chest and swung her legs under the wooden bench. Daniel looked at her and smiled. "You nervous?" he asked. Emma tilted her head. "Do I get a snack after?" He chuckled. "I think that can be arranged." Sarah smiled too, though her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her sleeve. It had been a long road to this moment, one filled with paperwork, hearings, visits from social workers, and emotional conversations they hadn't expected to have so soon. But they were here. Together. Judge Patricia Avery entered the room with quiet authority. Silver hair, glasses, calm eyes. She didn't look at all like the stern figures from courtroom dramas. She looked like someone's grandmother, someone who knew what it meant to carry stories that weren't hers, and still hold them with care. She glanced down at the file. "Emma Grace Mitchell," she read, then looked up. "Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Carter, you're both here to request joint custody and a legal name change?" Sarah nodded. Daniel spoke. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge turned to Emma and smiled. "And what do you think about all this, Miss Emma?" Emma blinked, surprised to be asked. She sat up straighter. "I think it's cool," she said. Laughter rippled through the courtroom. "And do you like Daniel?" the judge asked kindly. Emma thought for a second. "He makes good pancakes. He reads the same story even if he's tired. And when I had my cough, he didn't leave." The room went quiet. The judge leaned back, eyes thoughtful. "Children are often the best judges of character," she said softly. She turned to Daniel. "Chief Carter, are you aware of the full legal responsibilities of parenthood?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you accept them fully without condition?" "I do." "And Ms. Mitchell, you are requesting this change not because of pressure, but because you believe it's what's best for your daughter." Sarah's voice was steady. "Yes. He's earned this." The judge looked back down, signed something, and then smiled. "Then let the record show. From this day forward, with the full rights and responsibilities therein, this child shall be known legally as—" She paused, and then looked to Emma. "Would you like to say it?" Emma grinned and stood up on the bench a little. "Emma Grace Carter," she said proudly. Daniel felt his throat tighten. Sarah reached for his hand under the bench, and the gavel fell. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun wrapped them in warmth. Sarah lifted Emma into her arms, spinning once before setting her down. Daniel crouched and opened his arms wide. "Miss Carter," he said. Emma ran to him and threw her arm around his neck. "Can we still eat pancakes?" she asked. He laughed through the tears in his eyes. "Every Sunday," she smiled. "With blueberries?" "You got it." Sarah walked toward them, and the three stood there for a long time. No rushing, no traffic, no distractions. Just three names woven together by something stronger than law: choice, grace, and staying. That evening, back at the apartment, Laya and Rowan helped decorate the living room for the Carter party. Balloons, hand-drawn banners, and one questionable cake with a very uneven hardened frosting that read, "Welcome, Emma Carter." Daniel stood by the doorway, watching it all. The girls laughing, Sarah in the kitchen swaying to soft music, Emma showing off her new name like a superhero cape. He didn't move for a long time, not because he didn't want to, because he didn't want to miss a single second. Later, after the girls had gone to bed, Sarah found Daniel sitting at the dining table with his laptop open and a letter half-typed on the screen. She peered over his shoulder. "To whom it may concern," it began. "My name is Daniel Carter, and this is the story of how I almost missed the greatest chapter of my life." Sarah rested her hand on his shoulder. "You writing for the paper?" "No," he said softly. "For her. For when she's older." Sarah sat beside him. "She's going to be proud. She already makes me proud every single day." Sarah smiled, then leaned her head on his shoulder. "She's your mirror, you know," she whispered. "Stubborn, gentle, always thinking." He chuckled. "I thought that was you." She kissed his cheek. "It's both of us, and somehow, she got the best parts." In Emma's room, Leah lay awake in the cot beside her. "You asleep?" she whispered. Emma turned over, blinking in the moonlight. "No." "You okay?" Emma smiled sleepily. "I'm a Carter now." "I know." There was a pause. Then Emma whispered, "I think Daddy was scared before." "Yeah," Leah said. "Me too." "But he's not now." Leah turned toward her cousin and smiled in the dark. "Number he's not." That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He stood at the window looking out over the city lights, the soft glow of a life that used to feel out of reach. His phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. "She's dreaming about pancakes again." He smiled and texted back, "Me too." It was Sunday morning when the letter arrived. Not with the mail, not slipped into a mailbox. It was placed gently, almost ceremoniously, on the welcome mat outside Sarah's apartment door, just beneath the metal C that Daniel had hung a few nights ago. The envelope was pale blue, thick paper, no return address. Just 2 words written in careful cursive. "For Daniel." Daniel found it after coming back from the bakery with Emma, who proudly held the bag of muffins with both hands. "Daddy," she said, pointing, "there's paper on our floor." Daniel knelt, picking it up. He recognized the handwriting instantly. Margaret. He didn't open it right away. He set the muffins on the kitchen counter, made Emma a cup of warm milk, and watched her disappear into the living room where she built a castle from couch cushions and couch dreams. Then he stepped into the bedroom, closed the door softly behind him, and sat on the edge of the bed. His hands trembled slightly. It wasn't fear. It was something else, something heavier, something like closure. He opened the letter. "Daniel, if you're reading this, then I've already left Asheville. I didn't want goodbyes. You wouldn't have wanted mine. So I leave this instead. You were always meant for more. From the moment you were born, I saw it in you. Discipline, vision, drive. I tried to guide it. I tried to protect it. But I see now that I also tried to own it. And in doing so, I broke something I can never fully repair. Her name is Emma. I know that now. Not just in theory, not just as a threat to legacy. I saw her once, weeks ago. I had Rosner watch from a distance. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I came anyway. I had to see what had become of you. And I saw her, laughing in your arms, reaching for you with such trust it made my chest ache. You never looked like that as a boy. But with her, you became everything I never knew how to be. You're not just a father, Daniel. You're a better man than I ever allowed you to be. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I do leave this. The trust I created for the Carter estate, I've signed over 40% of its future revenue to a new fund. The Emma Grace Carter Foundation, for children like her, for mothers like Sarah, for families trying to build something I tried to keep you from. You don't need my blessing. But perhaps this is my apology, in the only language I ever knew. Tell her I was wrong, And that her middle name? It was mine once, and now it belongs to someone who finally taught me what it means to carry it with grace. Goodbye, Daniel. Your mother, Margaret Daniel, read the letter twice, then a third time. By the fourth, the words had blurred with tears he didn't realize had fallen. He folded it slowly, placed it in the drawer beside the bed, and sat for a long time in silence. He didn't feel peace, not yet, but he felt a door had closed, quietly, without slamming. And that was something. Later that afternoon, Sarah found him on the balcony, arms resting on the railing, eyes fixed on the horizon. "You okay?" she asked. He handed her the letter. She read it in silence. When she was done, she didn't speak. She just placed her hand on his. That was enough. That night, Daniel sat down at the dining table with Emma beside him, coloring. He pulled out a blank sheet of paper. "What you doing?" she asked. "Writing a letter," he said. "To who?" He looked at her. "To you." She giggled. "I'm right here, silly." He smiled. "But one day you'll be older, and I want you to know how this all happened." Emma tilted her head. "Happened how?" He placed a hand over her tiny one. "How I became yours." He wrote, "Dear Emma, there was a time when I didn't know you. I didn't know your laugh or the way you hold your rabbit when you're scared. I didn't know you'd love pancakes or hate itchy socks or name stars from your bedroom window, but I always knew I was meant to find something more. And then I found you. You didn't just change my name. You changed my story, and if someday you ever feel small or unsure or afraid that the world is too big, remember this. You are the reason I believe in miracles. Love always, Dad." The next morning, Daniel placed the letter in a sealed envelope and tucked it into a box with her hospital bracelet, her first drawing of Daddy, and a photo from the courthouse. The label on the box read, "For Emma, when she's ready." Years passed the way seasons do, quietly at first, then all at once. The small apartment on Willow Lane gave way to a house just outside Asheville, with a wide porch, white shutters, and a garden that Emma planted herself. She called it her memory patch. Daisies, baby's breath, sunflowers in the back, and something else. Little tin stars, painted gold and tucked between the flower beds. "Why the stars?" Daniel once asked her when she was 8. She looked up at him, face smudged with soil, and said, "Because stars grow in the dark." He didn't forget that. Daniel became more than a name on a badge. He became school drop-offs, lunch notes, last-minute Halloween costumes. He burned pancakes. He cheered from the bleachers. He cried quietly when she called him Dad in front of her friends for the first time. He was there for the first lost tooth, the first bad grade, the first time she asked, "Why didn't you and Mommy stay together?" And he answered honestly, gently, "Because sometimes people love each other best from a little farther away." And she nodded, because she had Sarah and she had him. And in her world, that was more than enough. Margaret Carter never returned to Asheville. The Emma Grace Carter Foundation, however, quietly began funding children's asthma treatment programs and support for single mothers. Emma visited the offices once when she was 10, and they let her plant a daisy out front. "It's for someone I didn't get to meet," she told the receptionist. But I think she was trying to say sorry. Laya kept drawing. By the time she turned 16, she was the youngest student ever accepted into the North Carolina School of the Arts. At her scholarship interview, when asked where she found inspiration, she pulled out a worn sketchbook and said, "From a man who stayed." On Emma's 17th birthday, Daniel gave her a wooden box with a small brass latch. Inside were her hospital bracelet, a photo from the courthouse, a drawing from Laya, the letter he wrote her that night in the hospital, and one tiny paper flower made from an old menu at High Five Coffee. She opened it with careful fingers. Then she read, silently, slowly. When she finished, she looked up at him. Her voice shook. "You saved all this?" Daniel nodded. "Every piece of you I ever got, I kept." She hugged him harder than she ever had. And that night, under a sky painted with real stars, they sat on the porch and said nothing, just father and daughter, together in the quiet. Emma graduated with honors. She wore a yellow stole and walked across the stage with the confidence of someone who had known love through storms. Her speech was short, but no one forgot it. They say you can't choose where you come from, but sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to choose who you become. I was named Emma Grace. Grace was my middle name. But I didn't really understand what Grace meant until someone came back, someone stayed. And that changed everything. Daniel wept in the third row. He wasn't the only one. On the day Emma moved into her college dorm, she left a note on the kitchen table, written in the same looping script Sarah used to write in. "Dad, there are too many words. So here's just one. Thank you for choosing me every day, even when I didn't know you were choosing. For pancakes, for car rides, for late-night math help, for never letting go. You once wrote that I was your miracle. But you were my garden, the one where stars grow in the dark. Love always, Emma Grace Carter." Daniel sat on the porch that evening, alone for the first time in a long while. But it didn't feel like absence. It felt like fullness, like legacy, like everything he never thought he'd deserve, sitting gently in his hands. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the tiny tin star Emma had made in kindergarten. Bent at the corner, faded in color. He placed it in the flower bed, next to the daisies, next to the ones who stayed, and somewhere deep in the memory patch of a girl who once walked into a police station and said, "My daddy's name is on the building." A garden kept growing. The end.